We've all been there searching for that one bit of magic that's going to get our golf game back on track. And what better place to do it than going down the rabbit hole that is YouTube? Well, that might not always be the case. The boys here at For the Members Podcast are going to go ahead and tackle that. I'm Nick Overholt, head golf professional here at Glenmar National Golf Club. Joining me are my first assistant, Carl Puglisi.
Hello, how are we?
And my lead teaching assistant and fitter, Ryan Dimmick.
Good afternoon, friends.
So, guys, we're going to start up kind of broad here right off the bat. Ryan, I'm going to start by asking you the question. What is, in your opinion, the number one danger with going to YouTube to try to get better at golf?
Number one danger is the information I'm receiving pertinent to me? Can I do what they're asking me to? Should I do what they're asking me to? And does it actually make you better? Those are the three keys that it's got to hit. If it doesn't get all three, it's not going to help. And we'll find ourselves in the same spot. It might work for a little bit, and then we go back to the same patterns and routines because it wasn't something that's going to set into our personal biomechanics.
Absolutely. Carl, same question?
Basically, I think everybody learns differently, like Ryan said. But one thing, you always have to take everything with a grain of salt on YouTube. These people make a lot of money, so they're going to always try to put out information that may or may not pertain to you. So I think just knowing where the information's coming from, if it's information that's going to benefit you, then I think that then that'll be pretty good.
If it says hit the ball 70 yards further, skip that video.
That's true. That's
a fair comment.
There's a lot of, exactly what they're looking for. They're looking for clicks, and false promises are going to bring those clicks. And we got to definitely try to sort through that. I think within that, when you're watching these videos and trying to determine if things pertain to you or not, there's going to be some words that you're going to hear that you might not necessarily know the answer of what it means. I tell people that their sequence is off all the time. I don't know that I necessarily explain that often what I mean by that. Ron, why don't you go ahead and explain what sequence would mean to you when discussing the golf swing and kind of help people understand if that happens to be said in a video, what they're talking about.
Nice. So I talk about sequencing quite a bit with my students. It's less about getting into a position and more about when we get into this position. Okay. So, does that, right arm cross over the left, or does the trail elbow get in front or to the side or behind our right hip? When do we get into our left side? Is it too early? Is it too late?
What's a trail elbow?
The one that is behind the
And this is, again, going back to the danger of YouTube instruction. People are going to say stuff like trail elbow, and if you might not know exactly what that means. To that topic, I think the one thing I do say well when I say sequencing is it doesn't matter if you get in the right positions if they're not happening in the right order.
That's correct.
Exactly. Right.
Or at the right time.
Exactly. Or at the right time. Absolutely. When you're looking at videos, I think the topics of those videos are really important too. I think that when videos are more specific to what you're talking about, they tend to do a better job of explaining what they're talking about.
Yeah, or even who you're talking to. Knowing a lot of golf advice is good for about 5 to 15% of the people that's out there. But the 5 to 15% may not know it's good for them and may not know how to implement from there.
I think one of the greatest examples of that is watch any grip video. What are they teaching you to do? Take a neutral grip, right? How many people benefit from a neutral grip? 15% of golfers need a completely neutral grip.
Yeah. So much of that has to do with just the way somebody's right arm folds. That's a different rabbit hole for a different day. But if your grip doesn't match the way that your body is constructed and the way that you're even setting the club up, you're already putting yourself in a position of failure, unfortunately.
Absolutely. Now, Carl, I know we were talking about kind of buzzwords that we see pop up a lot in these YouTube videos. What's another buzzword that we see pop up that maybe needs a little more explanation than is given?
one of the main things I hear in lessons is, how do I get this club shallow? Can I get this club more shallow? So I think that'd probably be a good place to start.
Like Lady Gaga shallow.
I was actually the shallow in golf is kind of like the Friends pivot. So you hear it just got shallow. You got to shallow. You got to shallow. Why? So Ryan, why don't you go ahead and explain to everybody, like, why would you want to shallow?
Well, so well, let's say it like this. So why is it a buzzword? Why are we hearing it as often as we do? It is an effective way for somebody to get the club potentially more to the inside. It is in large part a better way to swing driver for most people. But is it going to apply to everyone? You have to make certain compensations on the way down. And I'm going to use another buzzword. You're going to have to supinate or, get that left wrist into inflection if you're going to shallow that shaft. Otherwise, it's going to be unstable.
In other words, bowed or cupped.
That's right. So, when you talk about shallowing, a couple of real famous YouTubers that really like to talk about that. It's not that it's just shallow. Other things have to happen as well for that position to be effective.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's body type plays a large role in how you need to shallow the club, and two, whether you feel like you need to shallow the club more. Length of arms versus height, the importance of being measured so you know those things.
Can you think of any good examples of tour players who don't shallow on the way down? Lee Westwood is one.
I was going to say Lee Westwood, or he went to the Live Tour. Abraham Answer.
Yeah, there you go.
I don't even think he shallows the club a degree. Or Victor Hovland, same thing.
What you'll notice with all three of those golfers, and this speaks to my teaching style, but their trail hand grip or their right hand grip for right hand golfers is going to be more on top of the club versus somebody like Dustin Johnson or Matthew Fitzpatrick. That would be more to the side or under the grip with their right hand or trail hand grip for a right hand golfer. So that talks about shallowing as well. The person who's going to need to shallow is going to be the person who has in layman's terms, a strong right hand grip or side and under right hand grip. They will need to shallow because that will help open the face instead of close the face. And at the end of the day, this is what we're really talking about: is good golfers have club face control. Okay. And so that is a measure of anybody that's good at this game. If they're good at this, they can control the club face.
Absolutely. So much of the type of grip that you need to use has to do with how your body works, right? How your right arm folds, as you talked about, dictates what your right hand or trail hand, however you want to say it, how it should go on the club. The speed of your hips really determines what your left hand grip should be doing, whether it should be more on top, more under, strong, weak, however you want to say that as well. And again, that goes back to why it's so hard to look at a grip video and be like, okay, this is going to fix my grip, because there's a very good chance that, for instance, for me, I have to play with a weaker left hand, as weak as I can feel comfortable with, and I have to play with a very strong or side under right hand. That would never show up on any YouTube video you're going to watch that's not made by somebody named Mike Adams or Terry Olson. So,
True.
And that's the most efficient way for me to play golf. Again, I can't tell you until the last 2 years how many times I've tried to fix my strong grip and try to go neutral, and it's not what I should have been doing at any point. So, contrary to what every grip video would tell me.
Grip videos are a funny beast. Hands are a funny thing. That's why it's, not to beat a dead horse here, but that's why it's important to, go to your PGA professional, go to your teaching professional, and, does this actually make sense for the way that I, as the player, need to create leverage, right? Is this going to add power or add speed, or is it going to take it away?
Yep.
When we get players to go faster, it's not that we are adding clubhead speed per se. Shift your perspective into more like it is plugging a power leak, right? So if we have less leverage on the club, it is going to make us less effective at what we're trying to create.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think another style of video that can get people in trouble is when everything is being stated in absolutes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do this and it will make you better. Again, the application of any of those things, there's 3 main sources of power in the golf swing, right?
Yes.
And not all of those items apply to every person. So if this, let's say the video is telling you to jump for more power, that definitely doesn't apply to everybody.
No.
So if you are somebody who shouldn't be jumping and you're down on the range trying to get faster by jumping, that's not making you better at golf.
No.
It's sending you down a very frustrating road, right?
A road of instability.
And Ryan, I think you and I we had this discussion of we find ourselves teaching people back into what they should be doing,
Yes.
rather than what they had been taught out of by, actually Terry said this the other day on the thing, preferences killed the industry, right?
Absolutely.
So instructors had preferences on what they felt like needed to happen or needed to be or what a golf swing should look like. Realistically, you put 9 different people in front of you, you should see 9 different golf swings.
Absolutely. It's a fingerprint.
Absolutely.
Personalities come through in golf swings. I see that all the time, particularly on the fitting side of things, as I'm not talking about technique or instruction, and I'm just letting them have at it. So the personality that goes, talks really fast, does everything really fast. Well, I'm pretty sure that I'm going to see a backswing that goes really fast and the downswing that transitions really hard into a golf swing that probably isn't that fast, but has a very quick tempo to it. So personalities and cadence come through a lot in golf swings, and we want to maintain that. Like, you are you, and we just want to make that you an optimal one for swinging a club in a stable way.
Absolutely. Claude, you get some more words over there. Let's fire another one out at us.
So the next one, and I wanted to ask Ryan this because this is something I hear a lot. I watch a ton of YouTube golf videos, and seeing that he's a fitter probably also hears this a lot. But anytime you're watching a fitting video on YouTube, they're going to always talk about a tipped golf shaft. Can you explain what a tipped golf shaft is?
So when the shaft comes into your major OEM companies, right? TaylorMade, Callaway, Cobra, what have you, it's going to come in at a raw length, and it needs to be trimmed depending on company and the shaft type. Needs to be trimmed most of the time equally from butt and from the tip of the club. Now, that being said, if we want to change the flex and make it more firm or stiffer, we would remove more of the tip section of the shaft to create more stability in the tip. Now, most of the time people think that that is a spin killer, and that'll take all the spin problems that they have away. That is for sure not the case. And sometimes it will add spin. What you're really doing is adding stability for more control. So it may go shorter, but most certainly will go straighter.
Okay, so here's another one that kind of correlates back to that one, which is you're going to see in the same video, is torque. Give us a little bit about that.
Well, torque is one of my favorite things to talk about when it comes to driver, and I talk about it a lot with better players. The way that I relate it as a fitter is what I just had mentioned just a couple of moments ago about, somebody's cadence or their personality in their golf swing. So a shaft that has very, very low torque is going to feel very, very stiff. Okay. It's not a measure of its flex. It is a measure of its feel. So if you have somebody that is very quick in transition at the top of their swing from back to downswing, they're going to need lower torque. conversely, if you've got somebody, like Ernie Els, who could rock a baby to sleep, in his follow through, he's going to need something that has more torque or feeling like the shaft has more play in it. It doesn't have a relationship with flex, at least directly, but it's going to feel like the shaft is more active. And for somebody who changes direction at the top of their swing more controlled or with less violence, they can have more torque, and it's going to actually help them in terms of speed and club face delivery.
Very cool. I think that's something that a lot of people probably hear on YouTube and have absolutely no idea. So when they come to the fitting, that's another thing with YouTube, is trying to understand that anytime you're learning from somebody, like Nick said, like, you're going to get clickbaited sometimes. Not everything applies to everybody. So like, always remember, try to get a second opinion, because golf is expensive. So if you're going to get a fitting and you have absolutely no idea what these words mean, when a fitter comes and talks to you about it, you're not necessarily going to have any idea what they're talking about. So understanding what you're buying, why you're buying it is really big in golf, especially now that drivers could be upwards of $1,000.
How much is your driver in your bag this year going to be, Nick, if you had a retail price on it?
900.
I think mine's close to 1,100.
Yeah, I was gonna say yours is more.
I'll stick with mine from last year.
It's golf equipment is getting expensive. Golf ball price went up for everybody this year.
There's a lot of golf balls coming out. Companies creating golf balls, which is kind of crazy to me. The new PXG ball. I don't know if anybody's
I can't wait to do
one.
that podcast talking about golf balls and golf ball fitting. That'll be fun.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I've seen some pretty scathing reviews of the PXG golf.
Yeah.
Balls, so.
Yeah, me too. Not the best.
So should be really interesting. I think another really important thing as it pertains to does this video apply to me? If you're currently working with an instructor, most instructors are going to be okay with you reaching out and asking if that's a good thing for you to try. Because I can't tell you the number of times where I've spent an hour with somebody and we've got them on the right track, and I can't wait for the lesson the next week because I can't wait to see how they build upon this. And the first words out of their mouth was, I saw this on YouTube and now they're working on something completely different or opposite even of what we were working on, right?
Yeah.
Consistency with what you're working on is so important because we aren't always going to make good swings, right? None of us are good enough to make a great swing every time. The guys on tour don't make a great swing every time, right? So know that when you're working on something, you're not going to do it perfect every time. So don't let that send you down another path just because you happen to make one or two bad swings during a session, or even, 4 or 5. We might start struggling while we're trying to make a change.
Yeah.
And that's okay as long as you keep working on making that change. If you abandon making that change for something, whether it's easier or more comfortable or whatever, you're never going to be able to make that change, and you're going to probably do way more harm than you're going to do good.
Yeah.
One thing I see on YouTube too, which correlates to that exact point, is when you're changing a golf swing, it comes down to trust, right? Like you said, what's the old saying? It takes 1,000 practice swings doing it the right way to master something, or 10,000 actually, I think it is.
10,000 hours is
10,000 hours.
Yeah.
So like thinking about that, it's just impossible for you to make all these great swings the day after your golf lesson. So like trusting that is, I think, the most important part in instruction.
It absolutely is. I mean, the Tour pros talk about it taking 6 months for a change to take place, and think about how many golf balls those guys are hitting.
Yeah.
Tour pros on average hit 800 balls. Now, 400 of those are probably wedges, but they're hitting 800 balls a day, and it's taking them that long for a swing change to fully, firmly take shape. Right?
And that doesn't include any practice swings, anything like that. Like they're swinging it over 1,000 times a day.
Absolutely. So if you've watched a different YouTube video every week for the last 6 months, what does your golf swing look like?
An unfolded lawn chair.
Correct. Exactly. I think another really important vocabulary to define, because I think it's something as instructors we talk about a ton, club path and face to path. I think those are two of the most important things, especially if you're down there hitting golf balls in the simulator by yourself. Two very important numbers to know and understand.
Without a doubt, that is a biblical truth, Nick. So before I even comment on that, let me just say that there is a difference. Okay, so if you're not here at Glenmora, where I constantly check those boxes that are being or giving us our data, right? There is a difference between face angle and face to path.
Very big difference, yes.
I, as an instructor, I care, but I'm more interested in the relationship of the club face to the path that it is swinging, and less concerned about the angle of the face. To me, that's an ambiguous number. It could relate to a million things. I want to know how the face is working with your path. So let's just say it like this. Here's another biblical truth. If you're going to hit a draw, everybody thinks you have to come from the inside and have a closed face. Well, half of that is true. If your face is closed to the path you are swinging on, you are going to hit a draw. The opposite is true if you're going to hit a fade. Even if you're coming from the inside, even if you're coming from the outside, if your face is open to the path you're swinging on, you are going to hit a fade.
Might be a pull draw or a push fade, but the ball is going to draw or fade in those scenarios.
And look, we can think of how many examples, who was probably the best push fader that, ever lived out on tour.
It's a good question.
I don't know.
Lee Trevino.
Okay.
You watched him get into his setup, and he started with square stance, and by the time he was done shifting his feet, he was aimed 20 yards left of his target, and he would hit this pretty little push cut into every shot that he hit.
And his mirror would be Kenny Perry.
That's right. Polar opposite of that. Cross the line at the top, and then swoop.
Push draw every single time. And not matter.
And that's me. And that's you as well.
Yeah,
being
absolutely.
Kind of a modern day Rory too. Rory's kind of push drawing it.
Yeah. Trying to think of another one. Matthew Fitzpatrick, he does it that way.
There's Kirk, who just won.
Yeah, that's probably the best example, especially of a winner.
Yeah, absolutely. It was wild watching that final round this past week and seeing both he and Eric Cole just hitting draws at every pin.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Pin left did not matter. Those guys were hitting draws because they knew that the ball was going to do the same thing every time. And that's a really, I heard this the other day. There are approximately 5 guys on tour who can work the ball both ways under pressure.
Mm. Wow.
5 guys out of the top 125 players in the world feel comfortable working the ball both ways under pressure, which is why it's so important to know your shot shape and to know that you can hit it under pressure and consistently, right? And to make the right decision on the golf course, right?
Well, yeah, that's a totally different conversation. That could be a 4, 5, 6 hour seminar.
Absolutely.
I'm trying to think of guys that can work it both ways. Definitely Tiger Woods. That is best iron ball striker that ever lived. And
Patrick Cantlay.
Yeah.
Patrick can work it both ways. Colin, when he's on, can work it both ways. He prefers one, but he can definitely work it both ways.
He's struggle busting a little bit right at the moment.
He is touch.
He all of a sudden started hitting draws out of nowhere with a super, super weak left hand. Not too many people set up with a weaker left hand than that man.
Nope. No, absolutely. And I think that's when we discuss that, right? That clearly means Colin made a change.
Mm.
And why?
It's a good question.
These guys, he's won 2 majors?
1.
2, yeah, maybe 1 or 2.
Regardless, he's won a major.
Yep.
And he still felt the need to try to get better, right?
Always.
And I think that when you look at preferences, he had an instructor who prefers something and maybe moving him in the wrong direction, right?
It's possible.
Colin has 2 majors, by the way.
PGA
and Open. Forgot about the Open, 2020?
I forgot about the Open, too.
I did just watch Full Swing, so that's why I was pretty certain.
I'm cool with being wrong. I'm definitely cool with being wrong.
Gotta be wrong sometimes.
It's the best part about having these supercomputers in our pockets is we can find out good information really quick if you know where to look.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of the basis of why we wanted to do this podcast today is the 3 of us, I can say for sure, we're truth seekers. And we want to give good information both to ourselves first, because we got to figure out if it works, and then to our student base, to our members, to those that are affected by the decisions we make around the game of golf. Want to know what is real and what is fiction, and is it a broad biblical truth, or is it something that is pertinent just to me?
And to some extent, we test it on each other.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
We all work together on our swings and getting better, and Christy as well when she returns. And the best way to know if something's working is to be able to test it with people who you can openly communicate with and communicate in an effective manner. And that could be another issue with YouTube videos, is the clarity with which the information is being communicated and shown. And to that extent too, if you're a kinesthetic learner, YouTube doesn't mean a whole lot to you, right? Like nothing that video is showing you is going to create a feel for you.
Yep.
Learning styles play a large role.
I was just going to say, can you explain learning styles? I think that's another way that people can understand this.
Absolutely. So there's three major learning styles for people, and that one is auditory, and that is people who learn through words and verbal communication. There's visual, which is people who learn by seeing, and there's kinesthetic, and kinesthetic are people who learn by doing or feeling. Now, people can be combinations of those learning styles, but most of the time people are predominantly one of the three. Now, my first lesson with somebody is usually trying to figure out what style of cue works for them. And I will use a visual, and I'll use a verbal, and I'll use a kinesthetic cue to see which one connects with that student best. Now, if I'm struggling to find that out, and if you happen to be listening to this somewhere and don't know what type of learning style you are, the best drill I was ever given was this, and it was to close your eyes and envision that you are shooting a free throw, something that most people have done throughout school. They've had to go to gym and shoot a free throw. Now, go through the process of shooting the free throw. Bounce the ball, go through the motions, look at the net, take the shot. Now, a auditory learner will hear the ball bouncing, will hear the ball hit off the backboard, go through the hoop. A visual learner will actually see themselves third party. They will see themselves take the shot and the ball go through. And a kinesthetic learner will actually make the motion while they're doing this exercise, or feel the need to make the motion.
Yeah.
Right? So that's one of my favorite ways to figure out what type of learner somebody is. If I'm struggling to connect with that student, I will go through that process.
I definitely have seen that over the course of my time. I think it's probably even more finite or specific than that. I usually kind of break up my students into two types of categories. Somebody who just wants me to tell them what to do, and somebody who needs to know all the information, the entirety of why this happens, why that happens. I do this because of this, because of this. When you set up that little exercise there, Nick, I was able to smell the basketball. I heard the ball bounce. I know the way it echoed off the gym floor. I pictured the bleachers. I heard the sound of the net snap exactly the way that I wanted, and probably took it even a step further and won the game and was carried out by the cheerleading squad all the way out the door to the school bus.
Congratulations.
That was deep.
Ryan just won state.
Pictured it the whole way. The whole way. But I'm definitely one of those people. I need to know all the information. I think that is part of the reason I was a late bloomer, let's say, with golf and being good at golf. Because I had to know more about myself than the average athlete who just needs to hear, okay, put the club right here and then hit it, or set it up like this and then hit it. The way people interpret information is so unique across the board. I could say something as clear as day to the first 5 people, and then the next 3 people after that construe that in a completely different manner. Communication, I mean, like you said, echoing what you said, so important. Did you hear what I said, or did you translate what I said through your own words?
Absolutely.
And that's what gets lost in uninteractive video versus, a one-to-one instruction session.
Do you ever have your student kind of repeat back to you what you've said or done, or re-explain what you've just done with them. So make sure that they have an understanding of what you're teaching.
Yeah, usually not in that hour, but I will in the future to see how they are practicing and processing their information. When most people really stink at practicing, I think that's probably the number one thing that most people have pretty reasonable swings that are more consistent than they think. But they go down to the range looking to practice. They don't know what they're working on, so they practice until they see a bad shot, and then they're one swing behind for the next 40 minutes because they keep trying to correct the ball that they already hit, as opposed to trying to create a good swing.
I say this a lot in my lessons. I'm worried more about your motion than what the ball does on this swing. Right?
Amen.
And that's, to that extent, I also always stress the effectiveness of no ball drills. A lot can be done by practicing a motion without a ball.
Yeah, which is something you're not going to see on YouTube,
Right.
Ever.
It's 3-1 rehearsals to balls struck.
Absolutely.
I beat my guys up and ladies up all the time. Not enough rehearsals.
Mm-hmm.
I just said something to you, and then you just stepped up and tried to hit it.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't try to feel it. We didn't try. Did you actually put it there?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can show you on video, but did you feel anything different?
Yeah.
And when you're making a change, depending on the change, it could be grandiose. I may need you to move that club 2 feet different than it was before that.
It's funny because I have a student who I teach who the first thing he says every lesson, he looks up and he goes, "Practice swing?" Always.
I bet I could pick up on that student.
So
Yeah, absolutely. Carl, what else you got for buzzwords?
All right. Let's go with attack angle, since we kind of did path and like face angle, stuff like that.
let's expand on that. Let's do attack angle, how it pertains to launch angle, spin, and angle of descent.
Perfect.
Jeez, my head hurts already.
That's what you do every day.
It's true. It's easy when those numbers are right in front of my face and I can relate them, usually just one of those things at a time. But angle of attack, let's start by defining these things.
Mm-hmm.
So Nick, what do you got for angle of attack?
Angle of attack is the angle that the club is striking the golf ball, whether that is down or up. Generally speaking, with an iron, we're going to be wanting to strike down to increase launch and spin so that we can control the golf ball the best that we can. And with our driver, we're going to be wanting to do as well as we can to hit up on the golf ball to limit spin, increase launch, and hit the ball as far as we possibly can. The amount you should hit up or down varies from person to person.
With that, and shot to shot.
And shot to shot, 100%.
Meaning what shot you're trying to create, not
Absolutely.
that we're doing it different each time.
This kind of goes back to the idea of steep versus shallow, right? Somebody who is steep with an iron, let's say they're probably hitting 5+ down.
Mm.
Somebody who is shallow with an iron is probably hitting 3 or less down, right?
I haven't seen too many effective iron players hitting less than 3.
Agreed. I'll take that into account.
That was not a dig in any way, shape, or form. I just want to hedge my bets here.
I live at 3. I live at 3.
Nothing wrong with that.
So
With 6 iron, that's good.
So, generally speaking, the steeper an attack angle, what are we going to see from launch and spin?
Well, we're definitely going to see more spin. The more you hit down, the more friction you create with the face and the ball at point of compression or at impact. It's going to rub up that face, causing more backspin. So, launch angle, the more you hit down, you are going to take away loft. That's what happens.
The launch angle is the angle at which the ball takes off from the golf club.
That's right.
Right? Now, that is the case up until somebody's hitting down and adding loft, in which case that can drive people nuts.
Yes.
I think that's another topic to talk about for another day. But if you are hitting down like you should be, but you're turning your 7-iron into a pitching wedge, you are in for a lot of short, spinny shots.
Yeah, and it's going to be really hard for you to hit the middle of the face where it's designed to be hit between groups 2 and 3.
100%. Now, we've talked about launch angle, the angle at which the ball leaves the club head. We've talked about backspin, which is the amount of revolutions that the golf ball is doing once the ball has been struck. What do those two numbers determine, Ryan?
Carry distance is going to be a big part of that, and how high it goes, as well as, I know what you're leading me into here, angle of descent. So what does angle of descent mean? So at the peak of the ball's flight, at what angle is the ball falling from the sky, right? So with 7-iron, we want that thing to be, depending on somebody's club head speed, somewhere in the upper 40s, if not low 50s.
Right.
Falling as vertically from the sky as possible. That way you have control over the distance that it is flying.
Right. I think what I was always taught is that if you're below 40, the ball is not stopping on the green. And if you're above 50, technically you're losing distance. But for higher swing speeds, you need that in order to control the golf ball so it doesn't curve way off the planet.
Yeah, so that has a relationship, right? So if that angle of descent is, let's say it's at 40 degrees, which would be too shallow of an angle of descent, meaning the ball is kind of landing more like an airplane instead of taking the elevator. Mm-hmm. If you have enough spin on that ball, if you're somebody who overspins it, yes, I'm going to try and get that angle of descent to be more shallow, if you will.
So actually, this just brought me into another thought, because I think this is one of the biggest misconceptions in golf. What goes straighter, more spin or less spin?
Spin is control.
Right. But I guarantee you ask 90% of golfers are going to tell you that less spin straighter.
100%.
Right?
100%.
Who can we blame for that one? Well, we can blame some of the major OEMs, because the way that they marketed golf balls was firmer the golf ball, less spin equals straighter.
Yep. And I think there's two really good examples of explaining this to somebody, right? How hard is it to slice a pitching wedge?
Extremely.
Right? And it's spinning the most of anything in your bag, versus how hard is it to slice a driver? Very easy, spinning the least amount on your bag. The other great example of this to me is you can never snap hook, or actually you can never slice a ball harder right than you can snap hook it going left. And that's because a hook has no spin and a slice has far more spin, right?
Just depends on the club or the loft of the club that you're using. I think with driver, I don't know if that necessarily would be true, right? Because you can't create as much spin with a hook, which means it's just going to fall out of the sky too soon. So we can go.
My point is that it can't override the axis.
That is correct.
Okay, so to break that down, basically when you hit a ball with a club face that is not square, the reason that a ball slices or goes another way is that it is turned off of its natural axis, right? So basically the line that the ball would spin around. Backspin will override the axis and get it back to where it is now horizontal again to the ground, let's say, right? And then it will fall straight. So that's why if you happen to hit a slice, you'll notice that eventually the slice will stop slicing. It will fall straight down at the end of its flight.
Right.
Versus someone who hits a hook, it never has enough spin to override the axis. So it will actually continue to curve until the ball falls. So that's the importance of spin, is that spin will correct your ball to straight eventually. And it's also why tour players now are edging closer to wanting to be between 2,600 and 2,800 on the driver instead of the 2,000 that we were aiming for in the 2010s, right?
Absolutely. It's the number one thing that I've adjusted in the way that I've fit in the last 5 years with TaylorMade. At first, I was trying to fit drivers at 2,000 spin. Now, granted, the ball's going to go further when you do that. The problem that incurs is that once you get below 2,000, even if you have enough loft or enough launch at impact, the influence that the club face creates when you don't have enough spin is going to be time and a half what it is if the ball is spinning an appropriate amount. Meaning, so even if you only have a driver club face that is closed 1 degree, but it spins at 1,500 RPMs, well, you're going to miss that shot 60 feet left. And you only missed it by 1 degree. That is too fine a margin for pretty much anybody to live within. And the faster you go, the more egregious that miss becomes.
This is, I think, for golf pros, like what you just said with the missing of 1 degree being a missed fairway, essentially. One of the biggest complaints that golf pros have as it pertains to tour coverage is when a tour pro misses a fairway or misses an iron shot or whatever the case may be, and the analyst goes ahead and breaks down the golf swing and says, well, you can see that this happened. Well, you can't see 3 degrees, right?
No.
That tour player's swing is probably going to look like every other swing he made that day. And to tell somebody that from a down the line view, you can see a 3 degree open club face is absolutely ridiculous, right? And to that point, people tend to love the analysts who they say, tell it like it is. They don't tell it like it is. They tell it like they think, right? There's a big difference in those two statements, right?
Yeah.
It's like the constant conversation that I have with whether it's a fittee or a student is feel and real. And do those two things actually match up? You know, what you feel like you're doing versus the reality of what's happening. The closer that those two things become, the better the golf that you play.
Absolutely. I think to roll it back to the YouTube discussion, when you watch a video that speaks in absolutes, that's an issue, right? When they're not giving any room for there to be any differences from player to player, when this is what happens, end of story, period, that's another reason to kind of get out of there and look for something else. Stay on the same topic, but find somebody who's going to give you the right information that not every single person moves the same way and does the same thing.
Nor should they.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Carl, why don't you give us one last buzzword to wrap this up?
All right, I'm going to let you guys kind of choose between. I have 4 left. I know one I'd like, but we'll kind of take a vote. So I have dynamic loft left. I have tempo, bounce, and grind. Now I think tempo. I just want to say one thing about tempo, actually, because a lot of people never talk about tempo. Like Ryan said before, there's normally 2 different types of personalities. You have A and B. A person is going to want to do everything fast. B person is going to want to do everything slow. So tempo and speed are 2 different things. Always remember that. You could have Rory McIlroy, who swings it at 125 miles an hour. He might have the same type of tempo as someone else that swings it at 85. They're just moving it faster. That's all it is. But the club's moving in the same way. They're getting a pause at the top. Everything's moving in sequencing, back to that word, the way it should. If you guys have anything to add there, if not, you can pick one of the others.
I think balance is really hard to explain without a visual. So I think that's a tough one.
What was the other one? Dynamic loft?
Dynamic loft.
I'll tackle that one because I see and I use it a lot when I fit. So dynamic loft is the relationship of attack angle, the loft of the club that you have in your hands, and what it's creating at impact, as well as the spin that it's creating. So if you dynamic loft, you might launch your driver, let's say at 10 degrees, but you're spinning it at 4,000. Well, your dynamic loft is going to be closer to 14 and a half, somewhere in there. Because you're creating so much spin, that spin is going to make that ball rise and peak very, very high, as opposed to something, if you have 10 degrees of loft and you hit up on it, 1 or 2 degrees, and we don't create that spin, and you have 2,000 spin, well, that dynamic loft is going to be somewhere closer to 10. Depends on the person. I don't want to say that one is better than the other, but that is the reality of what's happening.
In layman's terms, would you say that dynamic loft is basically the amount of loft delivered at impact?
That is the amount of loft delivered at impact is launch angle. But the more spin you add to that loft at impact, the more that dynamic loft goes up. Thus increasing your peak height.
Okay.
So the more spin, the more peak height, the increase of angle of descent.
Well, I'm not going to lie then. I had dynamic loft and lie angle backwards for my entire life.
Yeah, dynamic loft is that relationship of attack angle, launch angle, and spin.
Okay. Interesting. that makes sense as to why those numbers are up on the screen on the track.
A lot of times they're going to be really close, especially with driver.
It's-
You'll see almost like a 1-to-1 relationship, but when you get into 7-iron or wedge, that kind of thing, when spin is getting up into the 7,000s, if not 10,000s with, wedge, sand wedge, what have you, that's when you'll really see dynamic loft go up. You'll see stuff in the 40s with pitching wedge and anything with lots of loft on the face.
Awesome. Well, guys, I think this was a really great conversation. We hit a lot of different topics, which was awesome. Everybody who's listening to the podcast, first of all, please like and subscribe to the podcast too, because that way you won't miss any of the podcasts that we put out in the future, or any also instructional videos that we might put out in the future. In addition, please leave comments if you have any topics that you'd like for us to touch on in the future, and let us know what you did like from this version of the podcast. With that being said, this is us signing off, and have a great week, everybody.
Appreciate y'all.
Thank you. Have a good one.